review of Unit 5. So we're going to be discussing critical issues for homeowners. This includes maintenance issues, safety and security issues. We'll talk about taxes and insurance. So there's really quite a lot that will be covered in Unit 5. If you're following along in your manual, this will start on page 189. So let's talk first about just a general overview for this section. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about safety and security. This is something our clients, if they've been renters, they've probably never really had to worry too much about things like changing locks. So we'll talk about that. Certainly they've not had to really worry about and be responsible for home maintenance issues. And financial management changes when you're a homeowner. So we're going to talk about some specific things to really help them in that direction. If they become a homeowner, they are now going to be responsible for hazard insurance, maybe even flood insurance. They'll have to pay property taxes. So there's going to be some things there that we need to go over with them. Keeping records becomes different because now they're responsible. So there's going to be some specific record keeping that we want to recommend for them. And as far as post-purchase requirements and considerations, we'll talk about things like refinancing, home equity loans, maybe some cautions that we can give them related to that. So this is, in general, the topics we're going to be going over in this unit. So the purpose of including this in pre-purchase education for our clients is we really want to educate them on how they can protect this new investment. For many of our clients, this is definitely going to be their biggest lifetime investment. So protecting it really becomes critical. And in most cases, they are going to have brand new responsibilities. They've probably never had to take care of maintenance or save for property taxes. So we want to really prepare them for not just the financial responsibilities, but all the mechanical things that go into it. What should they do to prepare their home for the winter? So there's a lot of information related to these topics. We're going to do just a very brief general overview for this unit. It's really important that we, work with our clients to get them to appropriate professionals. If they really need specific guidance on things like maintenance, we're going to need to refer them out because this is a huge topic. And the idea of once you've got a house, what are your responsibilities, can really be pretty overwhelming. So we're going to do kind of a high-level overview in this unit. It's really just a framework to start to build all these various important topics. And everything's going to be different depending on your regional area. If you live in a hot climate, it's completely different from somebody that lives in Detroit. We have to worry about cold weather in Detroit. So it's really different depending on your geographic area. As far as safety and security, let's start with that. So our homeowners in the past, if they've been renters for all their lives and this is their first time going into homeownership, in the past they've had a landlord. So if they lost their key, they went to the landlord. If they got locked out, they went to the landlord. If somebody broke in, the landlord came and changed the locks. So it'll be the first time that it's going to be their responsibility. Not only are they going to have to, keep track of those things, but they may even have to install safety equipment. Maybe they have to, put up a security door. So it's going to be their responsibility now for that safety equipment. Some agencies have had some success in working with local partners, perhaps a hardware store who might come in and do education or even donate some new equipment. Maybe they'll donate smoke alarms or carbon monoxide detectors. So you might find a local partner who's willing to help you with some of these things. It's important that clients know when they purchase a house, the first thing they're going to have to do is change all the locks in the home. If there's an alarm code, put a new alarm code system in there. If there's a garage door, even if they have the code, make sure they reprogram that if it's got one of the keypad door entry systems. So they're really going to have to make sure all of that gets changed out. If there would happen to be any broken windows or a door that doesn't lock properly, time to get those repaired, and it's going to be their responsibility to get that done. And even though as renters, it's still important to know your neighbors. As a homeowner, it's especially important because you want to know that your neighbors are going to be looking out for you and you're going to be looking out for them. So that may be equally as important as a rental situation, but because you're now the homeowner, if there's, water coming out of a downspout and it looks like the downspout's getting loose, you want your neighbors to say, hey, did you notice that? So establishing good relations with your neighbors is important from that perspective as well. You want to make sure you have emergency and non-emergency information available. Who do you call if you have a water leak? Who do you call if you have a power outage? So just making sure that you have that information available. So before somebody moves in, these are just things, kind of a safety checklist that maybe could be developed with them to make sure that they've got all these important pieces of information. If they have a lot of landscaping around doors and windows, maybe just reminding them it's important to keep those bushes trimmed. You want to have easy access to those doors and windows. So maybe just doing some simple reminders like that might be useful. Some other things related to home safety. I mentioned earlier that sometimes you can get a local partner who might be willing to donate some of the things mentioned here. That could be a smoke detector, maybe fire extinguishers, maybe multiple fire extinguishers, because it would be important to have them located in various parts of the house. Providing carbon monoxide detectors is something that we've had some success on a local level, having those provided for our clients. Many people don't know what radon is, let alone that they should have a radon detector in their homes. If they're moving into a two-story house, having an emergency ladder would be important so that they could do evacuation in the case of an emergency. And even something as simple as having a meeting place for the family if there's a fire. Where do we all meet and get together? We need to have some sort of an evacuation plan so that we can get out of the house safely. So it's really important to just talk about that as a family. Establishing where you're going to keep important paperwork and valuable paperwork would be important. And an emergency supply kit, even if it has something simple like just, 3-day supply of water, even a start to something like that. I know some people, you can get very elaborate, of course, with this, but even just having a basic 2 or 3 day supply of bottled water would be a start. So these are all important home safety considerations for somebody who's a new homeowner. Now, when we move into a discussion about home maintenance, I think one of the things that can be challenging is talking with clients about what's the difference between home maintenance and home improvement. Well, improvement is something that's going to improve your property value. You're adding a deck, you're doing some remodeling, you're combining 2 rooms into one, so it could be very different. So it's important to talk with your clients about the difference. You're going to maintain your home value by keeping up with home maintenance, but you're not necessarily going to be increasing your home value just by keeping things in proper working order. So sometimes this can be a little bit of a challenge for clients to understand, listen, I just put on a $5,000 roof on the house last year. What do you mean my property value didn't go up by $5,000? And what's really happening is, you're just maintaining your property value by doing proper home maintenance. It's more a matter of emphasizing the importance here of protecting your investment. So some examples of home maintenance would be making sure that the home is properly contributing to the value. So maintaining that house is going to keep that home value solid so that it doesn't start to go down because repairs are necessary. Making sure that you complete routine and seasonal inspections, not just inside but outside. Take a look outside the house, walk all the way around, look at all the gutters, see what needs to be done. So it's important to just make sure on a seasonal basis that you're routinely looking at those things. As far as regular home maintenance, another real challenge here is making sure that clients are including this in their budget. It's kind of like car maintenance. It's hard to convince somebody to save for a car repair when your car doesn't need repaired right now. So with home maintenance, it's important to come up with some sort of a system, even if they just start with $50 a month to try and budget for home maintenance. Some sort of a system to try and get that just built in as a line item in the budget, because that's definitely going to be something. There's always going to be some home repairs that are necessary. Even if it's just something as simple as changing furnace filters, you're going to have to make sure that you keep up on that and get that done. It's important to keep records of all the work that's being done, and even receipts, because if somebody goes to purchase the house, they may want to know, where did that flooring come from. So this is kind of a hard habit to get into, I think, for a lot of our clients. I think record keeping for many of us in general can really be a challenge, but it's especially important when, this is a big investment. So you want to be sure that you emphasize the importance of keeping maintenance records for your clients. If a client is getting a home warranty plan, there's a lot of variation there. Some are really great and cover a lot. Others, they're so limited, they're almost kind of pointless. So because there is such a wide variation on a home warranty plan, just because somebody has one doesn't really mean anything. Until you have more details about what's really going to be covered in that home warranty plan, I would not assume that anything's going to be covered. If they want to take out a warranty plan, same thing. There's a wide variation in cost and what it's going to cover, and you just really have to fully kind of research those to determine if that's something that you do want to purchase, and if you do want to purchase it, really investigate what's available. Now, routine maintenance, what do we mean when we're talking about that? Well, routine makes you think it's something that I'm going to have to do more than once. So it's something that you're going to have to be completing on a regular basis. So an example would be cutting the grass. You can't just do it once and you're done. You always have to keep up on your lawn maintenance. Plumbing repairs, that is a system in your house that is constantly working. So you may constantly have repairs that have to be done to any sort of a system like that that's in constant use. Keeping track of, painting and keeping things fresh. If there's holes in the walls, making sure that you keep up on fixing things like that. As I mentioned, just like with the plumbing system, another system that is in constant use would be the heater or the air conditioning system, or both. So those are systems that have to have constant maintenance. Even something as routine as just changing the air filters. It's got to be done, so there's got to be a habit. If there's a hot water heater, make sure you get in the habit of draining that hot water heater. So there's really just a lot that has to be done on a routine basis. As far as seasonal maintenance, what we're talking about here would be things that should be done in the summer or in the winter. So examples of this might be cleaning out the gutters and the drain pipes once a year. Once a year or twice a year, draining that hot water heater. Making sure that, at the end of the spring storm season, you check the roof to see if you're missing any shingles or have any leaks. It should be a constant routine to just be looking at the ceiling and checking for leaks, but you might also make it a habit twice a year to go up in the attic, because that's not going to be something that's easily visible or that you routinely do. Checking the foundation, the siding, the driveways, even going down into the basement and making sure you're routinely inspecting that to see if you have any dampness issues. So there's a lot that you could add to this. This is just kind of a sampling. And there's a lot of really nice checklists that are available out there. Even some of the hardware stores have it when you're just walking by the end caps. They have some available. So there's just a lot of things that a new homeowner or even an experienced homeowner really needs to be aware of. Energy Star is it's a rating system that they came out with from the U.S. It's from the Environmental Protection Agency, so the EPA put it out combined with the Department of Energy. And it's a way that when you buy appliances, if they have an Energy Star rating, it means that they are energy efficient. So, the whole idea of the program when it came out was just to promote using these energy efficient products, because in general, it helps the environment, but for our clients, it helps them save on utility costs. So it's good for the environment, but it's also good for our clients. And there's some really useful information. If you look at energy.gov, there's some really nice information about making sure you're utilizing energy efficiently. And you can even contact your local utility companies, and they'll frequently come out and do an inspection and an energy audit to help you make sure that you're doing the best that you can on energy efficiency. One of the final sections that we're going to talk about here is financial management. So what do we mean by financial management? That's a pretty broad category, right? Well, related to new homeowners, we're going to be talking about things that maybe they're not used to. What's the difference between, do they have a higher mortgage payment than they used to when they were paying rent? They're going to have an increase in expenses because they should be saving. They should be saving for home maintenance. They may also have property taxes and HOA fees that they have to save for. So these are things that if they were paying rent before were just kind of built into the rental amount that they were paying. Homeowners insurance is maybe not just hazard insurance. Maybe they also are going to be required to have flood insurance. They could have earthquake insurance if they're on the West Coast. So they're going to have some needs as far as insurance to make sure they're keeping track of. It's very likely they're going to have higher utility costs depending on where they were renting previously. Usually a single-family residence is going to have higher utility costs. And being responsible for the repair and maintenance, again, that's a huge responsibility for someone who's previously been in a rental situation. They may even have increased transportation costs. If they now have to drive farther for their work, they may have an increase in transportation costs, or maybe they have to pay for parking. So if that's something they're not used to, that could be a difference for them too. It's important that a client understand how to review that escrow disclosure statement. So they're going to get it once a year, and my experience has been that clients don't pay much attention to it. They really don't look at it, and they think if their payment went up, it's because their interest rate went up. Well, if they have a fixed interest rate, that didn't happen. So frequently clients are really confused about changing in payments because of tax or insurance obligations. So this can be something to review prior to purchasing the home, and just making sure they understand that even if you have a fixed interest rate, your payment's going to change from year to year because of changes in your escrow statement. And this might also be a good time to say, hey, I'd like to be able to do, just a once a year checkup with you. When you get that annual escrow account statement, that's a good time to come in and review it with me so I can make sure that everything's on track and you're not having any issues. So just reviewing kind of the purpose of that escrow account, because if they're a first-time home buyer, they've never heard of this before. This is not anything that they've ever had to deal with. So understanding that that lender is escrowing for taxes and insurance, but you know what? If the taxes go up or the insurance goes up, you're ultimately the one who's going to be responsible for picking up the shortfall if enough funds were not escrowed. And I've seen some pretty big payment jumps if there's been a shortfall in the calculation because of changes. Not only do you have to make up the prior year shortage, but now your escrow payment went up for the projected year. So I've seen some pretty big jumps in payment because of escrow changes, and it really can be a bit of a shock for clients. A couple other things related to, we're going to go over a few things here related to homeowners insurance, property taxes, and also proper record keeping for homeowners. So as far as homeowners insurance, be aware that there's a lot of differences out there in terms of the levels of coverage and how much is covered. Most mortgage companies are going to require that you carry replacement value. Sometimes this can be difficult to explain to a client. If a client lives in, let's just say, Detroit, property values have really gone down in Detroit. So they don't understand why their house is worth $30,000, but they have to carry $80,000 worth of insurance because if their house burned down, that's what it would take to replace it. So making sure we educate our clients about the different levels of coverage that are available. And the amount that you pay, a lot of that is going to depend on how high your deductible is. And any more deductibles, kind of mandatory deductibles, can be set by insurance companies. They don't really have $100 deductibles anymore, or $50 deductibles. Frequently is set as maybe 1% of the home value or 2% of the home value. So there's a wide variation in the deductible amounts that we see out there. There's also a lot of variation on what personal property is covered. So it's really important to read the insurance information so you know if you have coverage on your personal property. If, for instance, somebody just takes out FAIR Plan, which is the Fair Access to Insurance Requirement coverage, that's only going to cover the house. That's not going to cover any of the contents. So depending on where you get your coverage, you may or may not have really good coverage on your personal contents in the house. So it's important to make sure that those are included. Liability is becoming a big issue. If you have somebody injured in your home, do you have liability coverage? If you hire a painter to come out and paint your house and he falls off the front porch and breaks his leg, he could sue you because maybe that porch railing was loose. So knowing that you have some liability coverage can also be important. Loss reimbursement, there's a couple things to go over here, and you can see on the screen we talk about replacement value versus reimbursement value. And those could be different. So you might take a look at your policy and see what it covers you for. If you have a loss, if there is a fire. If there's a fire, are they going to pay to replace all your furniture? Or are they just going to pay and say, well, it's 10 years old, it's only worth $300? That's not going to help you much if you only get reimbursement for the value it is, because now you've got to replace an entire household full of furniture. So having replacement value coverage is much better and more comprehensive than just having reimbursement value coverage. As far as taxes, and we're not just talking about property taxes here, but income taxes. Many clients have heard that, hey, when I get a house, I'm going to get a big break on my taxes. Well, the reality is it might not be as big a break as what they think, but they really should get some expert guidance. And if they don't have a tax professional or an accountant, they could always utilize one of the VITA sites. And I know many of our agencies that we work with, they operate one of the VITA sites, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance sites. And that way they can have someone who is trained in income taxes help them and make sure that they are deducting costs that are allowable. So hopefully they are able to deduct their mortgage interest, maybe some of their closing costs, the mortgage insurance if they're paying PMI. So we're not talking about hazard insurance here, but if they're paying mortgage insurance, FHA or PMI insurance, it may be deductible, and property taxes as well may be deductible. So there are a lot of tax implications that we really are just not trained as general housing counselors to help them on. So this is where you want to be able to refer them to the appropriate person to really help them get the most of those tax benefits. As far as records management, again, the house is probably their biggest asset. So the reasons that they want to keep records would be for long-term planning purposes. They want to be able to plan ahead and know and be able to fall back on their records and get that information. For insurance purposes, if they would have some sort of a disaster, they're going to need to document what was in the house, what their belongings were. So for insurance purposes, it can be important to do. A lot of people now that they have access to smartphones, they just walk around the house and videotape everything, and that becomes their document about their personal records. Financial records, of course, you want to keep track when you do work on the house. For mortgage purposes, you want to keep track if you're making extra payments. So keeping good, complete financial records becomes especially important when you're a homeowner. And all these records are going to be important potentially for tax filing purposes. And now that you're a homeowner, you've got to keep good records if you want to deduct things. And even as far as avoiding capital gains tax, that's not such a big deal anymore because they made some changes to the laws. But in the past, you would want to keep track of every improvement you did to your house. That's not so much important for tax purposes, but keeping track of improvement is certainly going to be something that's recommended as a responsible homeowner, and it's also going to help you when it comes time for resale. Personal insurance policies, we hear a lot about mortgage insurance, mortgage life insurance, and having term and permanent life insurance. This is not really so much related to home ownership as it is just kind of basically making sure that you've got good insurance in general, because you do have to plan long term now that you're responsible for this large asset. Mortgage life insurance, it's still around. It's not as popular. It's very expensive if you take it out from your mortgage lender. Typically, it's very expensive. The other problem is that sometimes it's only for a limited time. On mortgage life insurance, maybe for the first 5 years, you've got mortgage life insurance. Well, if you die year 6, maybe it's expired. The other problem I've seen with mortgage life insurance is that, some people, they're disabled. They may not die. So if it's set up as life insurance, it's not going to help you if you're disabled and you're not able to make your house payments. Having adequate term and permanent life insurance, that would be even recommended as a renter. So it's maybe something to just review with your clients that it is recommended they talk and get a quote on what it would cost them to have some life insurance. One important consideration to go over, and I find that we tend to typically overlook this with homeownership classes and clients, some people don't know the impact of changing title to the property. So they might, just without thinking, go add their kids to their property. Well, guess what? If your kids are in a bad accident and they were responsible and they get sued, the kids have an asset. And I'm talking about adult kids as far as over 18. So you have to be really careful if you're going to go changing ownership. And they really should get legal advice if they're contemplating any type of ownership changes. It's a pretty big deal. And yet I run into family after family who are constantly making changes on the title. They're adding people, they're taking people off, and they're not even really understanding the implications of doing that. So it's very important to talk with them about, anytime you're considering a change in ownership or the title, get legal advice. Certainly if there's a separation or a divorce, they're going to want to be sure that they've got some legal advice there, because if you jointly own the home, certainly there's implications there for separating things out. And the last thing I want to go over here is just, there's a few really important things that, again, I think we tend to overlook in the whole scheme of things. Once a client is a home buyer, they've accomplished that big goal, they're happy, they've got home ownership, we probably need to give them a little education and caution about the following: refinancing, home equity lines of credit, and home equity loans. Refinancing, as soon as you're a homeowner, you are going to start getting solicitations, and you're going to continue to get solicitations offering lower interest rates and all kinds of promises, lowering your payment, and it really can be a trap. There can be a lot of fees involved with refinancing, and unless you're really savvy and asking the right questions, it can really be a negative. So we probably just need to add a word of caution to all of our clients and make sure that they know, be careful. It's not something you want to do lightly. Taking out a home equity loan is another thing that is a really big decision. And I see people doing it all the time without really thinking through the impact of borrowing against their home equity. When they go and get a home equity loan, whether it's an open-ended loan, a revolving line of credit, or a closed-ended loan, they are borrowing against the equity that they have in that house, and now they have a new loan payment. And unfortunately, what I have seen frequently is someone who gets into trouble with credit cards, go to their bank, get a home equity loan, and now they just took out a secured loan on their home, their principal residence, their largest asset, to pay off unsecured debt. So it's really tempting, but it just really can be a pitfall. And I know that it's tempting. Clients get in over their heads, or they get behind on the credit cards, And if they're able to get approved for a home equity loan, it seems like a good solution. But now they just took unsecured debt and put their house up as collateral and maybe even set it up as a 15-year loan. So they're going to end up paying back a very large amount in the whole scheme of things. So I think it's just probably worth taking some time and giving our clients appropriate cautions about watching out for this once they get into the house. And this concludes Unit 5. Thank you.